Manohara Gopi Paranadana Madana Manohara Kali Adamana Vidana Kali Adamana Vidana Amalarina Mamiya Vilasa Amalarina Mamiya Vilasa Vipina Purandara Navina Nagara Bora Vamshivadana Subhasa Vipina Purandara Vipina Purandara Navina Nagara Bora Vamshivadana Subhasa Surakulana Sana Raja Janapalana Surakulana Sana Nanda Godana Raghuvara Nanda Godana Raghuvara Govinda Madhavana Vanita Daskara Govinda Madhavana Vanita Daskara Sundarananda Gopala Sundarananda Gopala Ramuna Tatachara Gopi Vasanara Dakara Maya Ramuna Tatachara Gopi Vasanara Dakara Moya Radha Vallabham Navananatavara Radha Vallabham Navananatavara Bhagati Vinodasaya Bhagati Vinodasaya Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram 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 Hare Hare
Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Gopi Janavalabha Girivaradhari Jasodha Nandana Braja Janaranjana Jamunatira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Madhava Jayam Vishnupa Paramahamsa Parivrajacharya Shatarushata Shri Srimad Bhagavatam Srila Prabhupada Ki Prantura Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Gaur Premanandi. All glories to the Summon devotees. All glories to Sri Sri Guru and Gauranga. Om Aknanantaminandasya Gananjana Shalakaya Chakshunun Militanye Natasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupagadamayan Dadati Swapadantikam Vancha Kalpaturubhyashta Kripa Sindhu Bhyarevacha Patita Nam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare O Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya O Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya O Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Vasudevaya Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 7, Chapter 5, Text 23 and 24. Continuing, we're hearing about the process of Archanam. It's a really long purport, so I'm just going to start the reading like yesterday from where Mataji left off. This is on page 257 of this book. It says here, Grihastha devotees must adopt the Archana Vidhi, or deity worship, according to the suitable arrangements and directions given by the spiritual master. We heard about that a lot yesterday. Regarding those unable to take to the deity worship in the temple, there is the following statement in the Agni Purana. Any householder devotee circumstantially unable to worship the deity must at least see the deity worship, and in this way he may achieve success. Also, the special purpose of deity worship is to keep oneself always pure and clean. Grihastha devotees should be actual examples of cleanliness. I guess the brahmacharis are off the hook. That's a joke, anyway. Yeah, we're aren't you? In the Bhagavatam, 12th canto, it says the symptom of Kali Yuga is that one of the symptoms of Kali Yuga is that the brahmacharis are always unclean. Their ashrams are kept always unclean. That's why I mentioned that. Anyway, Deity worship should be continued along with hearing and chanting. Therefore, every mantra is preceded by the word Namaha. In all the mantras, there are specific potencies of which the Grihastha devotees must take advantage. There are many mantras preceded by the word Namaha. But if one chants the holy name of the Lord, he receives a result of chanting Namaha many times. By chanting the holy name of the Lord, one can reach the platform of love of Godhead. One might ask, then what is the necessity of being initiated? The answer is that even though the chanting of the holy name is sufficient to enable one to progress in spiritual life to the standard of love of Godhead, one is nonetheless susceptible to contamination because of possessing a material body. Consequently, special stress is given to the Archana Vidhi. One should therefore regularly take advantage of both the Bhagavata process and Pancharatriki process. Anyway, so the main point here is that the deity worship is there to keep one with pure habits. Otherwise, for the Bhagavat Marg means simply hearing, chanting, remembering. Then for the Bhagavat Marg, there is no limitations of time and space. It can be done in any sort of condition, clean or unclean. Like many times, I'll rise and immediately just start chanting. I'll at least clean the face, brush the teeth. And then I immediately start chanting, or we'll just do some achman, little achman, sprinkle on the head and start chanting. Then the devotee said, did you take bath? And then I said, yeah, I took bath. What type of bath? Nam snan, the bathing in the holy names of Krishna. So there are no particular standards of even cleanliness for chanting the holy name and hearing and so on, or purity in general. But with deity worship, there are a lot of standards of purity. And so in order to keep our habits pure, then the deity worship is prescribed. Then you say, well, what is the value of keeping oneself pure like that, or in terms of external cleanliness? I'm internally getting clean by chanting the holy name and so on. The sense of it that I have is that externally, if you don't keep yourself pure, then it increases the mode of ignorance, the influence of the mode of ignorance. And if you're self-realized already, that's not a problem for you, because you'll be above the influence of the modes of nature. But if you're not above the modes of nature, then when there's lack of purity, it affects the psychology. And once the mind becomes affected, then it's hard to maintain focus on your spiritual practices of bhakti even. Just like if you keep the room always very dirty, that has a psychological impact. When everything is kept very filthy, when you're not cleaning the body, it has psychological impact. And in the form of increasing ignorance. Just like when you see a dirty room, and you yourself are dirty also, you just feel like sleeping, like most of the time. For example, there's psychological impact. So then there's value of keeping the externals clean, aside from the internal cleanliness that Archana Vidhi helps with. So that's the main point being made in this paragraph. The deity worship is there to keep oneself pure. The other point Prabhupada brings out is that in the deity worship, there's conjugated names of the Lord, such as Vasudevaya or Narayanaya. These are called like conjugated names of the Lord. The names that we chant Hare Krishna, they're in the vocative. But in the mantras, the names of the Lord, I think they're in the dative case, Chaturhi, which means like when worship is being done, Namaha, it's a different type of case the name is in. And so even in the deity, Prabhupada is saying that in the deity worship, the chanting of the holy name must continue. And it does continue. In our mantras, we're chanting the holy name constantly. The mantras that you receive from the Guru, the holy name is being chanted constantly, along with the word Namaha, which means to offer oneself in full self-surrender to the deity, like that. Then he points out that even by chanting the holy name of Krishna, it is as if you're chanting Namaha many, many times. So what is the need for even that? And that is also true. That's a true point. But then Prabhupada brings out this point of purity, which is required. So the purport goes on. Deity worship has two divisions, namely pure and mixed with fruitive activities. For one who is steady, deity worship is compulsory. Observing the various types of festivals such as Janmashtami, Ram Nomi, and Nrsimha Chaturdashi is also included in the process of deity worship. In other words, it is compulsory for householder devotees to observe these festivals. Now let us discuss the offenses in deity worship. These are called as seva aparadhs. It's a long list, so get ready. Buckle up, everyone. A long list here. It takes up 2.5 pages. The following are offenses. A, to enter the temple with shoes or being carried on a palanquin. B, not to observe the prescribed festivals. C, to avoid offering obeisances in front of the deity. D, to offer prayers in an unclean state, not having washed one's hands after eating. That's interesting. E, to offer obeisances with one hand. When I first read Nectar Devotion, this one always stuck out to me. So whenever I would see devotees offering obeisances with one hand, I was like, ooh, they committing offense to the deity. This one, and not to have your feet covered. I think that's coming up in the list. When to not have your feet covered in front of the deities is also considered an offense. So when I used to always find fault with devotees when I would be sitting there in the back and I would be like, ooh, major offense here, like that. In the beginning of devotional service, learning so many rules is quite dangerous actually, because they're usually always meant to be applied to others and never to oneself. Anyway, so the offer obeisances with one hand. F, to circumambulate directly in front of the deity. So it's like circumambulate a person in front of the deity is considered an offense to the deity. Because the deity everything is meant for the deity's worship and glorification. So if you do so in front of the deity, it's considered an offense. G, to spread one's legs before the deity. I have a story which I shared with some of you before. When I'm a dancer by training. I was a dancer at least. So when I first joined the Krishna Conscious movement, I traveled to New Vrindavan with some friends, and they were doing some like letter folding or something like this, sending out invitations. So they asked us to help. So as a dancer, I sat down. It was just a temple room like this. I sat down like in a split. I just did the splits, and I was doing the thing in like a split, the seva. So one devotee was like looking at me like, so he was very gently, he said, you're not supposed to sit with your legs spread like that in front of the deity. This is an offense. H, to sit before the deity while holding one's ankles with one's hands. I, to lie down before the deity. J, to eat before the deity. K, to speak lies before the deity. L, to address someone loudly before the deity. M, to talk nonsense before the deity. N, to cry before the deity. To cry means to cry for material things. Also for spiritual things you may not also do, but crying because of some material loss or because of lack of material gain. Krishna, just please, I just need to pass this test. That is an offense. Crying before the deity for material things. To argue before the deity. P, to chastise someone before the deity. Q, to show someone favors before the deity. To show someone favor before the deity. I don't know what that one, the purport to that is. Something material, clearly. R, to use harsh words before the deity. S, to wear a woolen blanket before the deity. Like it's wintertime, you come downstairs with your sleeping bag around you or something like that. This is an offense. T, to blaspheme someone before the deity. U, to worship someone else before the deity. V, to use vulgar language before the deity. W, to pass air before the deity. This one really stuck out to me also. I think I've often shared this in class with one sannyasi. I was sitting in the doorway there. He was sitting just in front of us. I'm not going to say who it is. He's a very prominent Maharaj. And myself and Revatinandan Prabhu were sitting in the back. And in the middle of Japa period, he just like lifted up and let it rip. It was like extremely heavy. It was like, you know, like ricocheted off the floor and made a very loud sound. And then myself and Revatinandan, we looked at each other, we were like, because of this particular thing, the curtains are closed. So for me, it meant in the temple room. That was before the deity. Anyway, we'll see how severe these seva aparats are. We'll hear it in just a second after we get to these long lists. X, to avoid very opulent worship of the deity, even though one is able to perform it. Y, to eat something not offered to the deity. Z, to avoid offering fresh fruits to the deity according to the season. A, to offer food to the deity which has already been used or from which has first been given to others. In other words, food should not be distributed to anyone else until it has been offered to the deity. B, to sit with one's back toward the deity. C, to offer obeisances to someone else in front of the deity. D, not to chant proper prayers when offering obeisances to the spiritual master. E, to praise oneself before the deity. And F, to blaspheme the demigods. And the worship of the deity, these 32 offenses should be avoided. In the Varaha Purana, the following offenses are mentioned. A, to eat in the house of a rich man. Interesting. B, to enter the deity's room in the dark. Yeah, you're supposed to give some illumination. C, to worship the deity without following the regulative principles. D, to enter the temple without vibrating any sound. That's why the bell is there. You know, make some sound. Otherwise, you can knock. Just like the idea is, all these rules are meant to help increase our personalism, by the way. It's just, as we were hearing yesterday, just like you wouldn't fart before someone. You know, it's kind of considered rude. And it's actually impersonal, as if they're not there. You're like, boom, they're talking to you. I have really funny stories with that. I'm not going to get into that. Similarly, you wouldn't enter someone's house without announcing yourself by knocking or ringing the bell like this. These are the idea here. E, to collect food that has been seen by a dog. You may be wondering by the preciseness why a dog instead of not a cat, or particularly in India, there are stray dogs everywhere, you know, and therefore when you're walking around, you cover the boga. So the idea is that if anyone sees a boga before the Lord has enjoyed it, then through the eyes you are enjoying. So then it's been enjoyed before offering to the deity for his enjoyment and becomes contaminated. Just like you can see, suppose some cake is there. You don't cover it and you walk through the brahmachari ashram with it. You go, that looks good. You enjoyed it already. It's contaminated. Or just like when you're cooking for the deities, you're not supposed to taste it before offering to the deities, generally. You're not so, not actually never, but anyway, I'm thinking of some cases. So you go, this smells so good. Then it's already been enjoyed, it's contaminated. So in the sense, the idea is like that. Not seen by a dog. That can include a human being also. Did they see it? And in the spirit of enjoyment, it's been contaminated. F, to break silence while offering worship to the deity. G, to go to the toilet during the time of worshiping the deity. H, to offer incense without offering flowers. I, to worship the deity with forbidden flowers. J, to begin worship without having washed one's teeth. K, to begin worship after sex. That's dramatic. L, to touch a lamp, dead body, or woman during her menstrual period, or to put on red or bluish clothing unwashed clothing, the clothing of others, or soiled clothing. Okay. Other offenses are to worship the deity after seeing a dead body, to pass air before the deity, so that made it in both lists, to show anger before the deity, and to worship the deity just after returning from a crematorium. After eating, one should not worship the deity until one has digested his food. Otherwise, you'll be burping all that in front of the deity. It's disrespectful. Nor should one touch the deity or engage in any deity worship after eating safflower oil or hing. I don't know about safflower oil, but hing. It would smell funny. These are also offenses. In other places, the following offenses are listed. Another one. A. To be against the scriptural injunctions of the Vedic literature or to disrespect within one's heart the Srimad Bhagavatam while externally falsely accepting its principles. That's subtle. B. To introduce differing shastras. C. To chew pan and betel before the deity. D. To keep flowers for worship on the leaf of a castor oil plant. Some of these principles are clearly cultural. Therefore, I'm not relating to all of them. You may not be able to relate. E. To worship the deity in the afternoon. F. To sit on the altar or to sit on the floor to worship the deity without a seat. G. To touch a deity with the left hand while bathing the deity. H. To worship the deity with a stale or used flower. I. To spit while worshiping the deity. J. To advertise one's glory while worshiping the deity. K. To apply tilak to one's forehead in a curved way. That's hilarious. L. To enter the temple without having washed one's feet. M. To offer the deity food cooked by an uninitiated person. N. To worship the deity and offer bhoga to the deity within the vision of an uninitiated person or non-Vaishnava. O. To offer worship to the deity without worshiping Vaikuntha deities like Ganesha. P. To worship the deity while perspiring. Q. To refuse flowers offered to the deity. R. To take a vow or oath in the holy name of the Lord. A lot of these don't make sense because we would have to be trained up in deity worship. And what is the significance of all these? Some of them are cultural, some of them are psychological, like that. So we would have to be trained up. What is the significance of all these various rules and regulations? So Prabhupada continues here. If one commits any of the above offenses, one must read at least one chapter of Bhagavad Gita. Does that include purports? Or you can recite one chapter of Gita. So for the seva aparas are not usually considered very detrimental because they are counteracted simply by recitation of prayers from the Bhagavatam or from the Gita, or simply by chanting the holy name of the Lord. They can be counteracted. So the seva aparas are not usually considered very detrimental like the nam aparas are. Therefore, we heard in our study of the Madhurya Kandambini with Srila Ramapad Maharaj, that when he was talking about offenses, Sri Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur specifically pointed out that he was referring to the nam aparas and not to the seva aparas. He said because the seva aparas are easily counteracted simply by chanting of the holy name or by reciting a chapter of Gita or the Bhagavatam. Of course, if one commits a seva aparad with that in mind, then it becomes a nam aparad, the aparad of committing sin on the strength of the holy name. So Sri Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur specifically points this out. So one need not feel overly burdened by all the rules and regulations. And a lot of this actually pertains to worshiping the deity when you're on the altar and performing actual worship, and not just being in the temple room, a lot of the rules. In any case, one need not be excessively concerned as such. Of course, Sri Vishwanath also points out in the Madhurya Kandambini that as one is making advancement in Krishna consciousness, he consciously avoids seva aparad as well. In other words, it becomes a natural feature of his awareness in Krishna consciousness that it doesn't generally take place. But even if it does take place, then it is easily counteracted simply by chanting holy name, or as Prabhupada is pointing out here, reading at least one chapter of Bhagavad Gita. Prabhupada continues, this is confirmed in the Skanda Purana Avanti Kanda. So I guess you have to look that up. You're looking for the confirmation. Similarly, there's another injunction stating that one who reads the 1,000 names of Vishnu can be released from all offenses. In the same Skanda Purana, Reva Kanda, it is said that one who recites prayers to Tulasi or sows a Tulasi seed is also freed from all offenses. Similarly, one who worships the Shalagram Shila can also be relieved of offenses. In the Brahmanda Purana, it is said that one who worships Lord Vishnu, whose 4 hands bear a conch shell, disc, lotus flower, and club, can be relieved from the above offenses. In the Adi Varaha Purana, it is said that a worshipper who has committed offenses may fast for 1 day at the holy place known as Shokarva and then bathe in the Ganges. In the process of worshiping the deity, it is sometimes enjoined that one worship the deity within the mind. In the Padma Purana Uttarakhanda, it is said, quote, all persons can generally worship within the mind, end quote. The idea here is that one may not have all the necessary paraphernalia because of being destitute, materially destitute, and therefore worship could be performed in the mind for such persons. But it's not like if you have the facility to perform worship, then you perform worship in the mind. That was already mentioned. Prabhupada continues here. This is practically the same sort of purport you were reading in Nectar Devotion. Practically almost the same. The Gautamiya Tantra states, quote, for a sannyasi who has no home, worship of the deity within the mind is recommended, end quote. In the Narada Pancharatra, it is stated by Lord Narayana that worship of the deity within the mind is called Manasa Puja. One can become free from the 4 miseries by this method. Sometimes worship from the mind can be independently executed. According to the instruction of Avirhotra Muni, one of the Navayogendras, as mentioned in Srimad Bhagavatam, one may worship the deity by chanting all the mantras. 8 kinds of deities are mentioned in the Shastra, and the mental deity is one of them. In this regard, the following description is given in the Brahma Vaivarta Purana. In the city of Pratishthanapura, long ago, there resided a Brahmana who was poverty-stricken, but innocent and not dissatisfied. One day he heard a discourse in an assembly of Brahmanas concerning how to worship the deity in the temple. In that meeting, he also heard that the deity may be worshipped within the mind. After this incident, the Brahmana, having bathed in the Godavari river, began mentally worshiping the deity. He would watch the temple within his mind, and then, in his imagination, he would bring water from all the sacred rivers, and golden and silver water pots. He collected all kinds of valuable paraphernalia for worship, and he worshipped the deity very gorgeously, beginning from bathing the deity and ending with offering arati. Thus he felt great happiness. After many years had passed in this way, one day within his mind he cooked nice sweet rice and ghee to worship the deity. He placed the sweet rice on a golden dish and offered it to Lord Krishna, but he felt that the sweet rice was very hot, and therefore he touched it with his finger. Now this is all happening in his meditation, right, in his mind. He immediately felt that his finger had been burned by the hot sweet rice, and thus he began to lament. While the Brahmana was in pain, Lord Vishnu and Vaikuntha began smiling, and the goddess of fortune inquired from the Lord why he was smiling. Lord Vishnu then ordered his associates to bring the Brahmana to Vaikuntha. Thus the Brahmana attained the liberation of Samipya, the facility of living near the Supreme Personality of Godhead. That ends the Archanam section of the purport. There's an interesting story in this regard. It's the reason why I keep this picture upstairs in the room. With Nrsimha Brahmachari, so when Lord Chaitanya wanted to go from Puri to Vrindavan, at that time, Nrsimha Brahmachari was wanting to offer some seva to Lord Chaitanya, but he was some distance away from Lord Chaitanya. So within his mind, he began making a beautiful road, golden road, for Lord Chaitanya from Puri to Vrindavan. And on the road there were many wonderful flowers and plants and birds and beautiful water and so on. Very nice within his mind. In his meditation, he was not able to go past Kanai Natashala, which is a place in between Puri and Vrindavan. He wasn't able to meditate past that. So his meditation wouldn't go past Kanai Natashala. So at that time, he could understand that Lord Chaitanya was not going to successfully go to Vrindavan during that trip. And the reason was, anyway, because Gadara Pandit had been hurt by Lord Chaitanya. Anyway, that's another story. So then he told the devotees that Lord Chaitanya would not go past Kanai Natashala. They were like, how do you know? You're not even, you sitting here, how can you understand that? He could understand by his meditation, which was being fully accepted by Lord Chaitanya. So Srila Prabhupada writes an interesting purport in this regard. It's in chapter 2 of the Madhya Lila, chapter 1 or 2 of the Madhya Lila, where he says that one may wonder how it is that he was simply offering seva within the mind. And Prabhupada makes an interesting point. He says that the Lord is Bhava Grahi Janardana, that he accepts the bhava of the offering and not so much the offering itself. Or you can say the offering is the secondary consideration, and the primary consideration is the bhava, the intent or the devotion of the offering. So for the Lord, Prabhupada argues, which is very nice, that he's not interested in anything material. So gross material or subtle material, the Lord is not interested in anything material. So you may offer a gross apple to the Lord, or you may offer a subtle apple to the Lord in your mind. But Krishna is not interested in the gross or subtle apple, because he's not interested in anything material, but rather he's interested in the bhava. And then Prabhupada quotes this verse from Bhagavad Gita, Patram Pushpam Palam Toyam, Yame Bhaktya Prayachati, Taraham Bhaktya Paritam. So the word bhakti is used twice. In the context of which Prabhupada quotes this, refers to bhava clearly. So Krishna eats ashanami prayatatmanaha. He eats prayata atmanaha, that pure offering. So what is that pure offering? That pure offering is the bhava. Krishna really eats the bhava. He's hungry for love, not hungry for gross apples or subtle apples, but he's hungry for love. And it is that bhava that the Lord eats. So he could even literally eat a flower. That is possible for him because it is really the bhava that he's eating through that flower, as we are familiar with the pastime of Vidura's wife offering Krishna 3 banana peels because she was in ecstasy, she was in bhava. As soon as she heard Krishna was coming, she went, had come, she went into ecstasy, and in her ecstasy, she was opening the bananas and throwing out the banana and offering Krishna a banana peel. 3 times she did, not one, 3 times she did. And Krishna accepted the banana peels because he was eating the bhava. So Prabhupada says this, that Krishna is not interested in anything material, gross or subtle. So it is really, as we were hearing yesterday also, it is really, the rules that are followed are simply meant to facilitate a more devotional expression. It's meant to facilitate the mood of devotion towards Krishna. If it becomes all about the rules and less about the devotion, then we are criticized as with the fault of niyamagraha. Niyamagraha means, niyama agraha means clinging on strongly to regulations without understanding its purpose, essentially. What is the purpose of the rules being applied on a particular stage of devotion? They're meant to help us facilitate ultimately a sweet offering of love towards Krishna, which is what he's eating. So if one loses sight of that purpose and becomes very much interested in the rules and regulations, then they're criticized as having the fault of niyama agraha, clinging too tightly to rules. And that is considered the destroyer of bhakti. It is for this reason that Shravanam must accompany all the Shravanam Kirtana Smarana, particularly Shravanam I'm pointing out, must accompany all the application of all the other angas, including deity worship, so that you don't lose sight of the objective. That there's an actual objective in our offering of the deity worship and so on. So I was reminded of that particular pastime from Gaur Lila in relationship to this particular point about worshiping the Lord within the mind. Are there any questions? That's deity worship, yeah. Jeremy has a question.
Hare Krishna. I was reminded of a couple things while you were talking. The first was someone once asked Krishna Smara Prabhu, they said if it's inconvenient, is it okay to offer food in the mind instead of with the whole elaborate process? And his response was, well, can you eat it in your mind?
You offer in mind, you eat in mind also.
And I also heard a pastime from Prem Rasa. She said that some early devotees had offered Krishna some burnt sweet rice, and the whole plate of sweet rice just like flew across the temple room. And they asked Prabhupada about this, and he said, of course, you tried to offer the Supreme Lord some like burnt food. He's not going to want to accept it.
For all the empiricists in the room, they're like, come on. They probably just fell off the table.
But my question is about offering obeisances to others when the deities are present, because in practice it seems to be sort of like mixed. Like I see sometimes Rampad Maharaj will come in after Mangalarti has started, and people seem to look awkward, not know what to do. Some people offer obeisances, some don't. What are we supposed to do?
Yeah, like I said, I'm trying to think of a very clever way of saying this without sounding. Anyway, I'll say it like this. The rules, again, they have an objective. The objective is ultimately satisfying Krishna. Some say their Haritoshanam is the objective of anything in devotion. So that's always the bottom line, what will be pleasing to Krishna. So one who knows that Krishna's devotees are very dear to him, and that worship of the devotee is considered superior to worship of Krishna by dint of the reason that they are intensely dear to Krishna. So one may be offering one's respect to such great devotees of the Lord, even in front of the deity, as an expression of pleasing Krishna even, because these persons are very pleasing to you. So one offers, especially in the case of the spiritual master, and the person, Srila Rampal Maharaj, many or most here are his disciples. So that is only very natural, a natural expression of devotion to Krishna, to regard. So when that is in the forefront of the mind, we can hardly say that it's an offense, but rather it is service to Krishna. The sense of that statement, as I was understanding it, is that you know how in the material world we try to be socially viable. And so in that social viable, we start glorifying one another, even in false praise, offering respect to one another, without the pleasure of Krishna in mind, even amongst devotees who are immature. And oh, it's so good to see you, and they're offering obeisance. It's basically a form of sense gratification. So in that sense, it may be, because the principle of satisfying Krishna is in the forefront of the mind, then my sense of it is that that's the type of offense that's being talked about, where Krishna is eclipsed from your consideration, and it's all about you and that living entity. It has nothing to really do with Krishna. Then in that sense, it becomes an offense, because Krishna's become eclipsed from your consideration. Like that. That's my sense of it. Like I said, all these rules have very specifics there. Mother Lakshmi Mani may have something in this regard. You might have to turn it on. I don't know if it's on.
And two comments. One in regards to this. One devotee was known by his peers as the Iskcon's Jaya man. And in Vrindavan, he would always glorify Srila Prabhupada a lot when Prabhupada would come. So he would go on, Prabhupada, the savior of the whole universe, Ki Jai, Prabhupada, the most wonderful, fantastic, on and on and on. So Prabhupada came back from his morning walk, and this devotee was doing his thing. And Prabhupada went over to him and said, "Why don't you do something practical?" So what you just said reminded me of that. But the other thing I wanted to share was you had read the idea of not eating in the house of a rich man. And there seemed to be some, well, how does that work? But in Bombay, there were many very senior devotees who were going, well, very senior, they'd been devotees 4 or 5 years. They were going around and collecting Lakshmi in Bombay, and they found themselves being fed in the house of rich people. And they went to Srila Prabhupada unbeknownst, they didn't know why, but they told Prabhupada that they were feeling very disturbed in mind. They were very agitated and their minds were agitated. And Prabhupada asked them, are you eating in these houses as you go around? And they said yes. And Srila Prabhupada told them that they should just eat very simply there. Because these people, they think that they can buy anything. They don't really have pure devotion. Even they give some donation, that's nice, but their consciousness is not so good. So then you're eating food cooked in the house of a materialist, and it has an effect on your consciousness.
Even Lord Chaitanya, speaking of the father and uncle of Raghunath Das Goswami, he said if you eat food cooked by materialists, then your mind will become wicked. And the funny thing about that is that they were actually devoted to Brahminical culture. In fact, they were Vaishnava Praya was the language used. They were almost Vaishnavas, which means like neophyte devotees. And Mahaprabhu, in relation to them, said if you eat food cooked by a materialist, your mind will become wicked. It's pretty heavy. So sounds a little harsh, but yeah, that makes sense. Nice. All right. Yeah, another question or comment.
Prabhupada made this comment in the purport that although one can attain the standard of love of Godhead simply by chanting the holy names, we are susceptible to material contamination. Hence, the worship of the deity is recommended. You were also ending your class with this point that if one simply follows the rules and regulations without the stress on Shravanam, then there could be the risk of becoming a niyam agrahi. And perhaps that might explain why someone may be worshiping the deity for a long time but not sufficiently getting purified, because so my question is this, my understanding is that when there is some actual devotion, then one can harmonize one's external engagements with an internal purpose in mind. And he's not just simply following the rules and regulations, he's actually connecting the external engagement with his internal sense. But lacking genuine devotion, is it possible for a sadhaka to harmonize his external following of rules and regulations with an internal cultivation, or that's just not going to happen for him?
For which person?
A sadhaka who doesn't have, let's say a sadhaka before ruchi doesn't actually have genuine ruchi.
So then, if he doesn't have ruchi, then?
Is he just simply reduced to following the rules and regulations?
No, he has to know for what purpose he's doing. Just like in Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur's discussion of this niyamagraha, he says that the nature of the scripture is to give everyone an opportunity to go from the lowest platform to the highest platform of consciousness. And in between the lowest platform and the highest platform, there are many different levels of consciousness. And on each level, there are rules that are meant for persons on that particular level of consciousness. And they follow those rules with the next level in mind as their objective, then those rules help them to elevate. If they become qualified for moving to the next level and they remain attached to the lower level, then that is a fault of niyama agraha, clinging too tightly to rules. If they jump ship too early, this is the other fault of niyama agraha, and try to follow the rules meant for a higher level of consciousness than the level of consciousness that they're on, then they'll also not attain success, they'll fall down. So, Sve adhikaraya nishta saguna parikirtita. This is the verse that Bhaktivinoda Thakur quotes. That piety means to be fixed according to one's adhikar. Sve adhikara nishta. So one should be fixed according to one's adhikar. So naturally, because especially if you're coming new, we don't know all the levels of consciousness. It is for this reason that able guidance is required to help us ascertain adhikar. And then one applies according to their adhikar the various regulations of the scriptures as described by the spiritual master with the next stage of evolution in view. So if someone is, you're saying that lacking ruchi, therefore they may lack internal insight. That need not necessarily be a fault in the initial stages. If we're talking about someone before Ruchi, that means they're in the initial stages of Krishna consciousness. That is not a fault. Then they have to go on with their hearing and chanting and inquiring from the spiritual master. As they're getting purified, then the types of questions they ask will be transformed progressively. So in the beginning, we're asking the questions, why do good things happen to bad people? Or usually it's said the other way around, but or we're asking questions about reincarnation, about consciousness. Many of us are captured by empiricism, so we're asking a lot of questions about atheism, and some of what the atheists are saying seems to make sense, and so on. As you're getting purified by the process of Shravan and Kirtanam, the level of questioning also transformed. Then you start having questions just about the tattva. You know, what is Nam tattva? What is Bhakti tattva? That needs to be clarified. And that way all doubts are cut to pieces. After one has assimilated that level of Krishna consciousness, then the nature of the inquiry starts to transform. Now you want to hear more about Krishna's qualities, how those qualities relating to his devotees. That becomes very important for you. About his rupa, the nature of his form and the inconceivableness of it. You know, certain less esoteric things about Krishna's rupa, and then more esoteric things about Krishna's rupa, like the color of it, the shape of the limbs, and so on. This is mentioned in the 4 slokas of the Bhagavatam. Then, as one is more and more purified, then one wants to hear about the leelas of Krishna. And there's an evolution of the investigation into truth. And so sometimes when we hear from advanced devotees without proper guidance, we sometimes want to jump the gun in the evolution of inquiry. For example, you hear a beautiful class about the leelas, and one wants to hear about the leelas, which is not a fault, by the way. It is nice. But you are so unclear about the tattva. Then there's a jump in the evolution of inquiry. Krishna says, Jama karma chame divyame vamyo veti tattvataha. Those who understand the nature of my Jama and karma in tattva. So you have to understand the tattva. That means one would have to have understood particulars about rasa tattva, which is meant for sadhakas. Perfected devotees are relishing rasa. Sadhakas need to hear about the rasa tattva. That allows for insight into the leelas. Many times devotees jump the gun. They feel that no need to understand tattva. I'll just hear the pastimes. Like that, that may not actually be the necessity on a particular level of consciousness that they're at. So therefore, able guidance is always given as a criteria to help us understand the natural evolution of inquiry, is the way I'm expressing it now. You know, these are the type of questions that are relevant for you at this particular stage of consciousness from my observation. Like that. And then even when you have those sorts of questions, they can help you to, get a sense of if that's relevant for you at that present state or not. So what is pariprashna means relevant inquiry. Pranipata pariprashna sevya, so relevant inquiry. So then that requires understanding where I'm at in the evolution of Krishna consciousness. And then posing the questions relevant for that stage with the next stage in mind, like this. Yeah, and then Mother Lakshmi Mani has something on this also. Yeah, you can
just a quick
ask
follow-up.
her
One. So the essence of what you're saying is that before the onset of ruchi, then the sadhaka will inquire about the tattvas of devotional service to get a clear understanding of what the different stages of consciousness looks like, and then naturally, as he progresses, he will see a natural progression in his inquiry. Substantiate. So then I just have a quick question about, so in terms of deity worship, the tattva underlying deity worship, are we to understand that perhaps at our stage the deity worship is more like for purification and protection, and then after a certain stage the deity worship is really much more personal, it's more like Mother Lakshmi was explaining yesterday, there's perhaps a more natural affection towards a deity. So although you're waving the incense, you're waving the chamara, you're offering flowers, you're doing it not so much because that's the ritualistic formula, but rather this is an expression of your affection for the deity.
Certainly, that's natural.
I just wanted to say in regards to what your question was at the beginning, that also our relationship, and Prabhupada mentions it in what I read yesterday, that, and you mentioned it also, that guidance is required by the spiritual master, Prabhupada, before he starts that Archana section, where at the very beginning he says, therefore, guidance of the spiritual master is required. And doing our seva, especially deity worship, but doing any seva, with the idea that I'm doing this to please my spiritual master, on the order of my spiritual master, that's also a purifying level of consciousness, even if I don't think about Krishna, but I think about my spiritual master, that on Prabhupada's order, my spiritual master's order, I'm doing this service. I don't know anything. Just like we have that Brahmana who was reading Bhagavad Gita, and he didn't know how to read properly. So he's reading Bhagavad Gita on his guru's order. Every day he was reading Bhagavad Gita. And people were making fun of him because he wasn't reading it properly. But he was entering into the Leela of Krishna with Arjuna, and he felt that relationship very intensely, and it changed his heart. But the initial thought was, well, when Lord Chaitanya said, well, why are you reading this if you don't even know how to read? He said, because of my order of my spiritual master. So he said I should do it every day. So every day I'm doing it because it's on his order. And by following that order to please the spiritual master, then one receives change of heart. Because Krishna says, I'm in the heart. I do the work in the heart. I give you knowledge by which you can come to me.
As it is similar, Gopal Kumar also in the Srimad Bhagavatam, he also received the mantra from his guru without any explanation of the mantra initially. And so he maintained his chanting of the mantra only because it was given by his guru. So out of regard for his guru, he just maintained the chanting of the mantra, although he did not know of its significance. But there was purification going on by the chanting of his mantra, and that purification is expressed in the Srimad Bhagavatam as he's going to different realms of being and then receiving more and more information from sadhus about the true nature of God and his worship and so on. And because of his chanting of the mantra, he always felt some dissatisfaction with those various planes of explanation. And so that kept him moving along. And that was due to the influence of the mantra, that he was never satisfied in any particular plane until he ultimately reaches Braja, where he finds that his full satisfaction is achieved. So we see, simply out of regard for the instruction of the Guru, he began chanting. But the purification was evinced as he's traveling through these different planes and receiving, and like I'm using the language I'm using, as an evolution of inquiry. He was asking more and more and more questions. Then later on, in chapter 3 of the second book, he again meets his guru, who then explains to him the meaning of the mantra, and then again disappears. And then again, there's progression, and like this. So it goes on in this way.
Thank you. You're talking about Svesve Adhikari Nishtha. That means what the words a person, according to the qualification, he's fixed, and that is piety. So let's say if we talk about the higher platform, like Madhavendra Puri, he was talking like Sandhya Vanna Bhadram Astu. I don't want any Sandhya Arti, I don't want this. So at that level, doesn't this stage, the lower stage, become more fixed when you go to the next level?
Not necessarily. Also, the question is that Madhavendra Puri, there's this prayer, it's quoted in the Bhagavad Gita, also chapter 2, verse 52 or 53, 52 I think. And Madhavendra Puri is praying that my Sandhya 3 times a day, Haribo, my bathing 3 times a day, Haribo. So all the various rules and regulations given in the Vedas, I mean, no fault with you, but Haribo, like this. He just dismisses it. So his question is, when you become more elevated, aren't you necessarily going to be more fixed up on these other things? And the answer is not necessarily. There are 3 types of devotees. I'll explain it in this way. In Baladeva Vibhushan's commentary on Gita, he says that the Gita is speaking about 3 types of devotees. The neophyte is called the Swanishta devotee. And then there are 2 types of pure devotees he mentions. This one type is called the Parinishta devotee, and the other one is called Nirapeksha devotee. So he says that the Parinishta devotee is fixed in pure bhakti, but he wants to set an example for persons who are not so elevated, namely the Swanishta personalities and others. And so he also will externally follow the formulas of Vedic culture, for setting an example for those who need to follow such formulas. This is the Yad Yada Chariti Shreshtas verse. The context of that verse is Krishna speaking about Arjuna, even if you are self-realized, 317, Atmarati, even if you are Atmarati. So therefore, the necessity for dharma is due to a lack of satisfaction. Therefore, some engagement to gain some satisfaction. But for one who is Atmarati, there is no need for dharma anymore, because the goal of dharma is already achieved, namely self-realization. One is internally satisfied. He says, even for such Atmarati persons, they also perform dharma. And then he gives the example of Janak Maharaj, right? One of the Mahajans. They're also why are they performing dharma? Because they want yada chariti shreshtas tatari votarojana. Because whatever a great man does, common man will follow. And sayat pramanam, whatever he does, they will accept as evidence for what it needs to be done for progress. So these are called parinishta devotees. They are also pure devotees. For them, the regulations are not important. You'll hear other personalities in the scriptures are like Bharat Maharaj, but they even perform various karma kandya rites in their kingdom. Why? To set up the example for others with no faith in it, though, because they have faith in bhakti. So that's one type of pure devotee. There's another type of pure devotee who's called nirapiksha, and he's just like, Haribo, Sanjavana, see you later. Bathing 3 times a day, see you later. That will not be necessarily a component of their Krishna consciousness. So the answer is not necessarily. Will that become a component? Not necessarily. Generally, because ours is a preaching movement, we generally try to remain externally fixed up in some sort of proper social conventions. Otherwise, people may get freaked out. You know, there's one reason why Prabhupada wanted devotees to shave their head. You know, you should be clean shaven. He didn't want us looking like hippies. You know, keeping beards and long hair But actually, there's no fault. Many sadhus in India, that is natural. There was 2 options. You clean shave, or you just leave it raw, and it gets nappy and you got huge beard. That was natural. And you just focus on your Krishna consciousness. But ours was a preaching movement. So Prabhupada wanted us to show some sensitivity to certain social conventions for this reason. But it is not incumbent upon such an advanced devotee to do that. It is not necessarily his or her obligation to do so when they're on such exalted states of consciousness. Is there any other one I want to mention? Like this. This is the nearer picture.
Who is on the Nirpeksha platform. Absolutely means he might have started from Sanishta, then Nishkarma Yoga, and then Parnishta, and then he came to Nirpeksha. He didn't come immediately to the Nirpeksha level, so he must have shaved the hand before. He started his life with shaving his head, and ultimately he got to the clogs. Okay. So he must be fixed in that level then, when he come to the clog level.
Yeah, so of course, so that's the point in the verse, that verse from the Bhagavatam, Sve Sve Adhikariya Nisha. Before coming to one level, yes, he has fixity in the plane before that, until he gains qualification for the plane thereafter. But then, once attaining the plane thereafter, he may let go of some of the rules or all of them. Actually, the evolution as presented by Bhaktivinoda Thakur in his discussion on this verse is that when one is beginninglessly ignorant, so he qualifies for karma yoga. Then by his purification through karma yoga means nishkama karma yoga, he gains qualification for gyan. So when he's qualified for gyan, then he lets go of he may let go of, and he lets go of some of the varnashram principles and so on. He's just a renunciate, he's focused on gyan. Then when he becomes qualified for bhakti, this is the progression Bhaktivinoda Thakur presents. Then those practices, the gyan practices he may let go of, and he just focus simply on shravanam, kirtanam, smaranam. That's how he presents that particular discussion of this verse in the Asya Niyama Agraha. So the idea is that when one is on a higher level, it is not incumbent upon such a Vaishnava for following certain rules on a lower level. He may follow according to his desire. And it's not that he's breaking the scripture because he's following a higher law of the scripture. This is specifically pointed out by Jiva Goswami and Bhakti Sandarbha in regards to a person abandoning varnashram because of being qualified for gyan or bhakti. It is not that he's breaking the scripture, but rather he's following a higher law, if you will, of the scripture. So this is...
level and he's coming to the low level sometime. So he must be relishing that low level when sometime he comes to the low level platform to teach other people or
My understand. What are you asking? Is that if a
suppose
higher
he's
devotee
very
is
at a high level.
applying on a lower level?
Sometime he come to the lower level
Okay.
platform. So he must be relishing that platform or he must be just for the
I
educating the
can't
people.
say what his conscience is. My sense of it is that the necessity of doing so may be out of compassion. But his attraction is not there. His attraction, because of having higher adhikars, his attraction is certainly different. But he may apply, and within our preaching movement, we say we will apply for the sake of mercy towards those who are not so qualified like this. Oh, I think Mother Lakshmi Moni wanted this. I don't know. Did you want to say something on this? Yeah.
Whatever works in the situation, if he's preaching, he does what he needs to do to preach. And if Lord Chaitanya, even with Ramananda Roy, when he saw people over there watching, he thought, uh-oh, we can't get too intimate here because they're watching and they'll be affected by it. So in Prabhupada also like that. If he was in a public place and he was starting to feel some ecstasy, he would immediately, and he even said, so you saw that, but don't talk about that. That's not my preaching strategy, Then, so he's not, that person is not affected, doesn't even think about it. The fact that we're thinking about it is an indication that we're not there, because when that person is in that position of so advanced, he's not considering, well, should I or shouldn't I, or I don't like this, or I like this. He just does whatever is required by the situation.
Right. Like that. Okay. 2 minutes. Yeah.
2 minutes. Hare Krishna, thank you
There's
for
no
the class.
preamble. Just get to the point.
This kind of related to Jeremy's point about like when devotees come in, like Ramapal Maharaj, and offering obeisances. I was just browsing through the pastime Ambarish, and one thing I appreciate about that pastime is that when he invited Durvasa, there was kind of a dilemma between two etiquettes. When Durvasa Muni came in to take prasadam, Ambarish Maharaj was observing fast, and then Durvasa Muni went to the river,
Okay.
and so time had come for Ambarish to break the fast, but in this proper etiquette that you don't take prasadam before your guest comes back or takes. And Ambarish, he held, the personality, the Rasamoni, in higher position than the proper fasting etiquette. So he wasn't gonna break the fast. But the Brahmanas encouraged him to, and then of course the Rasamoni got upset. He meditated on. So my question is that there's also seems to be a dilemma in our life is that for Ambarish, the fasting is kind of impersonal, and he held the personal person in a higher position. But in regards to our practical experiences is that sometimes we see, devotees and senior Vaishnavas, there's like debate of, Prabhupada said this, Prabhupada said that, and you can't like follow everything Prabhupada said. And it's almost like a dilemma, like, I don't want to disrespect, anyone, but I can't follow everything everyone tells me Prabhupada said. And you don't want this because everyone's a person. And how do you go about, respectfully, like, I can't follow everything, I don't even know what Prabhupada said, or, because it seems like there's a dilemma, because everyone's personal, it's not like an impersonal, like, Akadashi.
Anyway, like Ambarish Maharaj, first of all, he did break his fast.
No, that's what I'm saying, he did.
Broke it and not broke it. And he came to that conclusion by his own intelligence, the Bhagavatam says. So he asked the Brahmanas, they gave various opinions, and finally he kind of said, I know what to do. He figured it out. So if one is mature, then they know how to harmonize apparently contradicting principles and then act from that platform. And if you can't do that, then you ask someone who can. Like one time, Prabhupada writes a letter to one Mataji, she was taking care of Tosi. And in this letter, he says that he was giving a few rules about how to take care of Tosi. And then Prabhupada says, and the rest of the stuff is just a matter of common sense. And if you don't have any common sense, then ask someone who does, like kind of a little heavy expression. So in a similar way, if we lack the maturity to harmonize contradictory statements of Prabhupada or other scriptures and so on, and that's affecting our ability to act, then you ask someone who can do that harmonizing work and come to the conclusion what would be the right sort of direction. Like that, simple. No biggie there. All right? All right, thank you all very much. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai.